Anne-Marie Eklund-Lewinder is the Chief Information Security Officer at the Swedish Internet Foundation, an independent public service organisation working to ensure the positive development of the internet. She's ranked as one of Europe's leading experts on IT security, and she's one of the 7 key holders of the internet. It's a small group of trustees who are able to access a last resort measure to reconstruct the internet in the event of a calamity, thereby safeguarding its security. Very important individual. Join Anne-Marie now as she explores the future and security of the internet and answers the question, can the internet be switched off?
Can you cut off the internet? Anyone who likes spy movies has probably encountered the scenario where some foreign power or supervillain wants to knock out the internet in a whole country or in the whole world. So I'm very honored to be invited to talk to you today. I'm Anne-Marie Eklund-Lewinder. I'm working as the Chief Information Security Officer of the Swedish Internet Foundation. And to be deserving talking to you about these matters, I've been working within this area for more than 30 years. I consider myself as a serious internet hugger and an internet pioneer. Internet is the biggest common communication platform that's ever existed. It started carrying short messages, Usenet news, and file transfer. The future was bright and full of hope. The possibilities were unlimited. Everybody on the internet were nice and friendly, and they knew each other by name, almost by name, or at least by the university where they worked. It was a world of academics and researchers, and they were all nerds. We were all nerds, in a positive meaning, that is. Today, the internet is so indispensable that one can rightly say that society is screwed without it. Today, even the critical infrastructures that satisfies our basic needs as electrical power, water, railways, and other distribution networks are centrally managed by monitored by modern IT systems. If this monitoring system fails or fall victim of cyber attacks, it will lead to serious disturbances. To run and monitor these networks, internet has become more and more indispensable as well. And yet, we do not spend much time improving or making the basic internet infrastructure more robust, more resilient, and redundant. And today, all critical sectors in society are possible targets. Transportation, finance, healthcare, food supply, process industry, you name it. During the pandemic, we have all become painfully aware of how dependent we are of internet for just everything. I mean, managing our jobs today and doing our bank affairs, shopping online, taking part in news reporting, and to socialize and express our opinions. You might expect that we today should know how to build in security in services and application, but unfortunately, security is still, in best case, something that is considered possible to add later on. Innovators have the functionality in mind, trying to make something that works perfect for the purpose it's aimed for. Time to market is crucial, and even with the best intention, it is important to think about the fact that what is a tool in one person's hand may be turned into a weapon in others. While we have become better protecting our technical systems from intrusions from the outside, social engineering today is used more and more to get under the skin or behind the perimeter protection built up by organizations to protect their information, systems, and users from the evil internet. By manipulating users, an attacker may abuse individuals' natural tendency to trust others, our willingness to assist, our thirst for knowledge, rather than using the technical vulnerabilities or weaknesses to get to the inside, or even more efficient, a combination of both. And from the inside, an attacker can make much more devastating and sophisticated attacks. We need to be aware that there are risks of disruption in the form of malicious code and intrusion attacks. Viruses, worms, trojans, and spyware can end up in your device if you download a file or application from the internet. if you open a file attached to an email, click on links you receive via social media, or if you visit a website that spreads malware through innocent ads. When you connect something to the internet, it's visible on the internet. And if it's visible, it's reachable. And if it's reachable, it is a potential target for attacks unless you do something to prevent it. Your TV, your refrigerator, your webcam, your toaster, your factory, your power plant, or whatever you have can be used in attacks on others or can be a victim of a serious attack. There will be a ransomware attack every 11th second by 2025 is the foreseeing. The global cost will be about $20 billion annually. So the best way to make the internet more secure is to realize you can't and to do your best to secure your own environment. Bad things will happen, no doubt. Just make sure that the consequences is kept to a minimum. Zero trust is the term for an evolving set of cybersecurity paradigms that move defenses from static network-based perimeters to focus on users, assets, and resources. Zero trust, including network segmentation, access control, patches, and updating schemas, monitoring, auditing, security in depth. These are your friends today. The fact that more and more of our data is being stored in the cloud, which is basically somebody else's computer, and among devices on the Internet of Things means that increasingly sensitive types of data are now more vulnerable than ever to being hacked and more attractive to hackers. At the other end of the string, trust has become one of the most powerful competitive differentiators in today's world. Trust is the defining quality that determines whether a service provider can continue to do business and have flourishing customer relations. As technology connects more of our lives and at an ever-increasing pace, it is how vendors and service providers build and maintain trust that will govern the success of digital interactions. Today, you can't innovate a single thing without knowing how internet works. According to the Swedish Internet Foundation's annual survey, the Swedes and the Internet, which we have been doing for a very long time, nearly half, or 46% of the Swedish population, are worried that large American companies such as Google, Apple, Facebook, and others are infringing on their privacy on the internet. Only 1/5 are worried about intrusion by Swedish government authorities. Swedes tend to trust the government. However, unrest has increased in both these areas from a 5-year perspective. Since 2015, the mistrust of the big tech companies has increased by as much as 17%, and most recently by 5%. Red line means worried, and the blue line means not worried. So let's move on to the core of this presentation. The question is it possible to disrupt or even turn off this digital artery that we call internet? Can we cut off the internet? Well, I can comfort you that there is no big red button to kill switch to turn it off. But what happens in operations where the communication and internet environment is managed by foreign players based in state whose political development leads to trust issues, well, how can we prepare for that? Was the SolarWind attack a preview of coming attractions, or is it something else? The right to internet access, also known as the right to broadband or freedom to connect, is the view that all people must be able to access the internet in order to exercise and enjoy the right to freedom of expression and opinion and other fundamental human rights. Nation states have a responsibility to ensure that internet access is broadly available and that states may not unreasonably restrict an individual's access to the internet. States such as Russia, China, Saudi Arabia, and South Africa opposed to this addition to the UN Declaration of Human Rights. And of course, what does the world look like today? Do everyone have access to the internet? Well, the answer is clear. No, far from it. The political dimension of the power struggle is driven by states that see access to internet as a threat due to the openness of information. In doing so, they try to limit the freedom on the internet as much as possible. Tragically, both economically and politically, human rights are still a non-issue in many states. Authoritarian regimes missed the boat on influencing existing internet standards that has been produced by IETF, the Internet Engineering Task Force, but so-called next generation networks provide them a new opportunity. The United Nations International Telecommunication Union, ITU, is an agency that, among other activities, hosts standards meetings between governments and telecom companies. Russia, China, and Saudi Arabia have used this forum to advance their vision for next generation networks, whatever that means. More totalitarian regimes are in various ways trying to limit the inhabitants' access to information and services. It can be described as a trinity of internet restrictions: censorship, surveillance, and repression, which is where you screw up the legislation and make what happens on the internet more illegal than it was before. Some of the countries that have tried to turn off the internet throughout the country or in specific regions use technologies that basically disrupt or block some of the services that many people use online, such as Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp, or take control of the actual connection to the rest of the world. The latter is easier in countries where you have a state monopoly providing telecommunication and internet access. Where you have a country with a lot of competition between different internet service providers, this is harder to achieve. But some of the eviler plots is when the regime turns on the internet access during daytime and let people communicate freely just to cut it off during the nighttime, using filters to identify and then arrest the people who communicated during the day, and thus exasperating the regime. That seems to be currently used in Myanmar and was also claimed to be used in Syria during the Arabic Spring as well. When regimes have tried to turn off the internet in a certain region or restrict access for certain group, it has usually been accomplished by disrupting service such as the domain name system. For the user, it appears as if the internet is not working, even if it's still there. There's a company, Sandvine, which is technical origins in a Swedish-based IT company, which helped the regime in Belarus to monitor and block the internet during the protest of electoral fraud. The technology prevented people in Belarus from accessing social media websites such as Facebook and Twitter. The company's dealings with the regime in Belarus have caused concern within Sandvine, the company itself. And during an internal conference call with employees that was quoted by the media house Bloomberg, one of the managers admits that the company's technology may have been used to block the democracy movement in Belarus, and that up to 40% of all web traffic had been blocked. But he also stated, Sandvine concluded that the internet and access to specific material on website was not a part of human rights. And that was a quote from that manager. And of course, you may discuss this, which might be a correct interpretation of the UN Declaration of Human Rights. According to media reports, the company's chief operating officer threatened those who talked about the matter outside the company that they would be fired. Previously, this company helped the regimes in Turkey and Egypt to monitor democracy activists. And there's another quote in this article about the company that is quite picturesque and that actually got to me. It reads, "We are heading down the rabbit hole where we are not using it for good anymore in the name of chasing the next buck." So this is just one example of a company whose, in my opinion, ethical compass needs to be adjusted somewhat. It's not all about the money. So let's get into the technical part. The internet infrastructure consists of several redundant connections that make it near impossible to bring down the entire internet, unintentionally or accidentally. Internet traffic is resilient and can dynamically reroute around any problem. I mean, it's engineering. Two critical internet systems that could, if attacked or exploited, bring down the internet are something called BGP and something else called DNS, and I will explain the meaning of this. Probably the most important protocol to assure the continued operation of the internet is the Border Gateway Protocol, BGP, which is relatively obscure. BGP is the routing protocol that determines how IP packets containing data move between networks at the granularity of organizations or autonomous systems called AS. Internet service providers have such an AS, and BGP is a so-called path vector, which means it looks for the shortest path length, the shortest number of ASs to reach a destination with the data packages. Whoever is advertising the shortest BGP route will simply get the traffic. And additionally, the more specific the set of routes that you're advertising, the more preferential your advertisement is. Unfortunately, the ease of advertising a shortest route can have devastating consequences. One of the most infamous examples of this happened back in 1997, when a small Florida internet service provider started inadvertently advertising specific net blocks for much of the internet in ways that made them the preferred destination for a massive amount of other routers. The effect of this was that a large portion of internet traffic was routed to this small provider, which had no way to deal with the resulting crush of traffic. Because the new best routes started being advertised throughout the internet, and even though the routers at the victim ISP were continually getting knocked offline because of the traffic, it kept on coming. And this led to a major outage on the internet. There has been several attacks with hijacked BGP deliberately or by mistake to reroute traffic, thus breaking the internet. In 2008, Pakistan Telecom wanted to block access to YouTube for nationals in the country by advertising BGP routes to YouTube as going through them. Unfortunately, these routes leaked outside of Pakistan and led to large portions of internet sending all the YouTube request traffic to Pakistan Telecom. And the same problem evolved. They couldn't handle the traffic, and parts of internet broke down. And just last summer, a large amount of mobile internet traffic in Europe was rerouted to service in China. Another cornerstone protocol of the internet is DNS, or the domain name system, resolving domain addresses for mail, web, streaming, and other services to an internet protocol or IP address, much like the way a phone book can be used to look up a telephone number. The IP address is necessary to route traffic on the internet. Bringing down the root DNS service would disable the ability to look up IP addresses and thus finding the right resources, and therefore break in some way the internet. The attack on the operator DYN's DNS service in 2017 is an example of an attack on DNS service that brought down the internet for a good portion of the US, and by all means, a lot of Swedish domains and sites as well. The good news is these critical systems, critical protocols, are widely known as points of failure for the internet and therefore heavily monitored. There is also engineering work going on to prevent accidents and attacks like this. While some countries routinely use internet blackouts in the wake of major political events or tragedies, such as following the 2019 Easter bombings in Sri Lanka, or during elections like the DRC 2019 election in Congo, and another example is Algeria's blackout during national exams in 2018. Also common is the use of blackouts as a social control mechanism to frustrate political organizing, as Karen did when it cut internet in its Anglophone region in 2017. Well, usually this type of internet blackout is at the request of governments who simply require the internet service provider to stop providing service. Authoritarian governments can potentially shut down the internet if they somehow all colluded against it, either by blocking internet access to citizens altogether, or by substantially limiting the access to it, the traffic as it happens in the different countries. Most recent examples are Uganda, Belarus, and Myanmar. There are ways around censorship, of course. There are privacy-enhancing technologies, or PETs, such as virtual private networks or VPNs, anonymous browsers such as Tor, which can help circumvent it. But censorship essentially prevents the vast majority of the population who may not be familiar with these tools to access the internet, de facto making it seemingly disappear. It's a possibility to actually keep track on the interference on the internet by following, for example, projects like oni.org and NetBlocks, which you have the link to on this slide. There's sites where you can follow whether there are disturbances for one reason or another on the internet and see what's going on. A cutoff of the physical infrastructure, like cutting undersea cables combined with satellite jamming, could cause continents to lose connectivity to each other and even fragment communications internally. This would be extremely complex to achieve, but may be possible for some nation-state actors, such as China, Russia, the US, and potentially the UK and France. An electromagnetic pulse, EMP, can also disable electronics at range quite effectively. While unlikely outside of wartime, this is probably the most effective way to shut down the internet within a large but specific region. The best known examples of this are from a nuclear weapon blast, but there are also non-radioactive means to cause localized EMPs. Targeted physical attacks at key locations and choke points could potentially disable the internet at a large scale as well. And yet another way to cut off the internet would be to shut off the supply of electricity for an extended period of time, which of course will add more dimensions to the problem, as it happened in Ukraine a couple of years ago. The conclusion is, even though it is hard to cut off the internet, it's possible to cut off the users in different ways, so they experience that the internet is gone. And what we know is that we know very little about the future, what will come. What we do know, it will not look like today. It never has. It is clearly a power struggle going on a very high level between, for example, traditional democracies and more repressive countries. This struggle affects people's access to the internet, and if we are unlucky, it affects the whole framework for the internet. The internet, like a person like myself, know it from far away. When it comes to the question of whose norms and standards should be those that apply on the internet, to prevent this from happening, there is no silver bullet, there's no quick fix, only hard work and awareness to create a better world. Because when a user gets more knowledgeable, more aware, more skilled in the technical parts, it's easier to not be the victim of different kinds of difficulties on the internet. So get wiser, learn more, and try to fight for an open and freely accessible internet. Thank you very much.